biggest probably thing in the news right now, although it happened this past weekend. The Iranian president was killed in a helicopter crash while traveling, inside of the borders of Iran. At first reported as a hard landing, and then reported as a crash in some pretty rough terrain, it sounded like, and it took him a while to get to the location, and then finally confirmed that the Iranian president Raisi was killed in that crash. Now, there's probably some folks that on initial reaction were jumping up and down, very excited. He's known as the butcher of Tehran. He's put down a number of protests within his own nation pretty violently, pretty horrifically, and not known, for having a soft hand even inside his own borders. So, the reports of his death were being and are being celebrated even within, Iran as late as today. So, why wouldn't people be excited when someone like that with a reputation like that and having done actions like that and activities like that? Why wouldn't people be happy that he died in that helicopter crash? He's an enemy to the West. He is an enemy to Israel, obviously. Iran has been funding, multiple terror groups. Elsa and I have been talking about this for weeks, months, really. Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, it's all coming out of Iran. Even, back in the days of Iraq, for those of us that served there, we knew that a lot of arms and ammunition coming into Iraq and supporting a lot of the terrorist organizations in the country at the time was all coming out of Iran. We knew that. It wasn't a secret. And that nation, obviously, and led currently, or at least up until this weekend, led by President Raisi, who has been an enemy of the United States and to the West. So again, why wouldn't we celebrate? Well, when you have something like this, an incident like this, and you have a loss of a leader, there creates a power vacuum. And in a nation like Iran, which is unstable, as much as they portray outwardly that it's a stable, very conservative, religious-led nation, there's a lot of instability inside of Iran, has been for decades. There is a youth movement, which, interestingly enough, if you go back in time to the late 1970s, the youth movement is what's turned over Iran into the conservative, ultra-conservative Muslim nation it is today. And now there's another youth movement that's pushing to loosen the reins a little bit and less conservative and more liberal. And they're back to wanting the things from the West that they don't currently have access to. So you're starting to see some celebrations in the streets of Tehran and around the nation of Iran, celebrating the death of the president. But that power vacuum is what should worry all of us. You've got a nation that is on the cusp of nuclear capability, although between us and mostly the Israelis, we've kept that at bay for a number of years. They're not nuclear weapon capable that we know of. They are not nuclear energy capable, I think, at this point, although pretty close. So that is of relief to all of us. But it is unstable, and that destabilizes the region significantly because we don't know who's going to fill that power vacuum. We can all hope and wish and pray that it is somebody who represents this youth movement, this less conservative movement. But the reality is it's probably not. They have an interim president in there. I don't know much about him other than he falls in line, obviously, with what the current policies and administrations of the nation are, which, has a religious leadership chain, kind of in concert with the political leadership chain. For those that don't know, the Ayatollah has, the grand leader, I think they call him, has as much power, sway, and has as much influence or more influence than even the elected government officials have. So the loss of the president is significant, but it's not as significant. So, but that power vacuum matters. There is the old saying of it's better to fight a devil than one you don't. We can talk about, that over historical, examples throughout the decades. There was a number of attempts by the United States, or at least consideration to, attempt to remove Hitler, to assassinate Hitler. there was an argument to leave him in power because we knew what he was capable of. Other leaders, the same thing, and we've had our fair share of attempted removals. We tried it with Castro. We forcibly removed some leaders down in Panama and some other places over the years, and Saddam Hussein as another one. But this vacuum could be filled by anyone. And, our intelligence gathering capability inside of Iran is probably not as great as we would like it to be. We do have obviously all kinds of electronic capabilities, satellite, radio intercept, cellular communications. We've got capabilities to monitor and watch, but I don't think that we've got as clear a picture on the ground as what's going on, in the human realm as we would like at this point. So we don't know how this is going to turn out. And that really should worry all of us. As much instability as Iran provides against, Iraq, against really even Jordan, against Israel, obviously, they do provide a little bit of stability in just knowing what we've got facing us. We know Quds Force, IRGC, we know what they're capable of. We know what the intent of Iran is in the current political climate. They are funding Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, in their fights, their terroristic fights against Israel, against, anybody, the Houthis launching missile attacks on U.S. vessels, in the region and those sorts of things. So we kind of know what's going on. We know what to expect. We know what precautions to take. We know what to monitor. But anytime you've got a vacuum like this, it creates instability in a number of arenas. And we all need to be concerned about who is the next in line and who becomes the next president of Iran. Because as brutal as Razi was, and as anti-Israel, anti-West, anti everything, as he has led that nation to be, the next person could be worse, could be much worse. It could turn out to be a much worse situation across the entire region. They may push for much more international terrorism, support much more international terrorism. They may not be as, they had that very hollow attack into Israel, a few weeks ago with the 100 or 1,000 drones, whatever it was, that turned out to be essentially nothing, except a show of force that really did absolutely no damage whatsoever. But you could have another, whoever replaces him, whoever becomes the next president of Iran could, be more reckless, be less apt to, be conservative in their actions against Israel or their outward actions against the West. So that the power vacuum is something to worry about. And it's something we all need to pay attention to. It's also interesting the way it's being handled internationally, whether you guys saw it or not. The UN, of all places, asked all the UN delegates to stand in a moment of silence for the president. And I understand, in the U.S., ambassador to the UN or U.S. delegate to the UN, said out loud, hey, this is not uncommon. We do this all the time. Standing in a moment of silence doesn't mean we support the individual or even support the government or anything like that of that nation. But what it does do is, we don't wish death upon anybody in a helicopter crash. That's the generalities of his statement, not mine. So he stood, the U.S. delegate, U.S. ambassador to the UN stood at the request of the assembly to do that, as did a number of other nations. Who didn't, though, is Israel. And they were frankly pretty pissed. Came out statement-wise and said, this is not acceptable, honor, dead or alive, doesn't matter, died in a helicopter crash, tragic accident. We don't care. He's a horrific human being, atrocities in his own country, atrocities across the Middle East. He's responsible for him, and we shouldn't honor him in any way, shape, or form. And even throughout the idea or the name, what are we going to do next? Are we going to honor Hitler? Which for an Israeli, for a Jew to invoke that name means a lot. So Israel didn't take kindly to the moment of silence, honoring the delegate or honoring the Iranian president, his loss of life in any way, shape, or form. And I don't blame them. I truthfully, I think the U.S. should not have stood. I think we shouldn't have honored. I think we should have, followed the example of Israel and not abided by the council and the assembly and probably just taken a seat through that entire thing. You may differ in your opinion, but that's the way I see it. I don't think we should have capitulated on that one at all. I think even the moment of silence, I think honoring that was too much for us. I think it was a mistake. I think it sends the wrong message, even with the verbalization afterwards, the explanation of why. I don't care. The visual is what everybody's going to remember, or the report that we stood in honor of that, of President Razi from Iran, his death. The fact that we stood in silence to acknowledge that is, I think, is absolutely the wrong message internationally, diplomatically, to send to anybody. So I think that was a blunder. I do wonder if that was something that was left to the decision of the U.S. representative to the UN, or if it was a directive from the White House or from the administration on what to do. My guess is it's probably a combination of both, but I think it was the wrong call, no matter whose call it was. I think it was a mistake. So we'll see how this plays out in the next coming days and weeks. It'll be very, very interesting to see what and who steps into power to fill that vacuum in Iran. Again, it's going to impact the entire region. Has the potential to have international impacts and outside of the region itself. So, could see effects in Europe, could see effects here, even in the United States, as far as exporting terrorism more so than what they've done in the recent past. So something to definitely pay attention to as that, progresses and it moves through the summer. Don't lose sight of that as our election is going on, although I would imagine that they would probably hold some kangaroo election, some BS, it's fixed, it'll be rigged, it'll be who they want it to be. I have no faith that it's a fair and democratic election of any kind. So we'll have to watch that, and it'll come within the next few weeks, and it'll move very, very quickly. So don't be distracted by that one. Pay attention to it because it has the potential to have global impact on everyone who replaces the president inside of Iran.